Well, kia ora everybody, and welcome to this month's Techbytes. It's great to be back. Having had a month overseas, I would say that I do like coming back to New Zealand, and as much as we poke fun at some of our issues like mobile coverage, I would say that while it's not perfect, there are other countries where it's not quite as good either, actually. Quite surprising, and Melissa's here on the call, but so I'm just going off the track a little bit, but the main road between Belfast and Dublin, which are the two biggest cities on Ireland, certainly has some points along that road where you can't get any coverage. So look, let me start with introducing Melissa Lee. Melissa is the MP for, actually, I've gone and lost that one. Where are the MP for, Melissa?
I'm a list MP based in Auckland, looking after the Mount Albert electorate.
Oh, there you go. Well, why don't we just crack into it? Why don't you introduce yourself, including just a little bit about your role as an MP?
Well, hi everyone. Thank you, Craig, for the invitation to have a conversation here. Well, I'm a list MP. This is my fifth term in Parliament, and I was first elected in 2008. And I currently hold the portfolios of broadcasting and media, digital economy, communications, ethnic communities. So quite busy and quite diverse portfolios. But there are some bits that I absolutely love. And, you know, your issue in terms of the black spots, hey, we need to actually fix that, eh?
Oh, wouldn't that be great? I've just driven down from Auckland actually to Wellington, and even now, there are spots where you go, hang on, this ought to be okay in our first world nation. Look, we're going to talk about some other things, but can we, the topics of these tech bites is often around the individual we're talking to. So what about a little bit, could you talk a little bit about your time before becoming an MP? I know that you came to New Zealand as a young adult. And so what drew you to New Zealand, and why did you stay here?
Well, I think you just aged me, because I'm going to have to talk about when I arrived here. I arrived and became a New Zealand citizen, New Zealand resident back in 1988. So I've immediately sort of given away my age. At the time, I'll go back. I was originally born in Korea, and my parents actually uprooted my brother and I to give us an international sort of experience, and they moved us to Malaysia.
Oh.
I didn't realize Malaysia was the international sort of experience, but absolutely loved growing up in Malaysia. Spent my primary years and secondary years in Malaysia. Learned Bahasa Malaysia, spoke Chinese, spoke Tamil at the time as well. And then, you know, in the Malaysian school system, you know, you had to speak Bahasa Malaysia. And then my parents decided that maybe that wasn't the best idea. We needed to sort of, expand our horizons, and we needed to be taught in English. So they moved us to an international school. And after high school, when I got to fifth form, my parents decided to actually sort of export me out to a different country. And that ended up, cut the long story short, I ended up in Australia, finishing my high school and university and going to university. And while I was at university, my parents decided, hang on a minute, both of our children are studying in Australia. Why are we still in Malaysia? Maybe we need to consider moving to Australia. So they came for a visit, and they really hated Australia. They thought Aussies were rude. It was too dry, too hot. And they actually happened to have some friends in New Zealand, and they came to visit New Zealand, absolutely fell in love with it. And typical Korean family, when parents decide that they're going to move, you have no choice but to actually say, yes, mom, yes, dad. And so my parents decided for my brother and I that we were moving to New Zealand, and hence we moved and became New Zealand residents in 1988. So that's the beginning of my journey in New Zealand. When I first got here, hated it, because I was living in Melbourne, lying on street lifestyle as a university student. You could go to, a cafe, have coffee, pizzas, you could afford it. And, you had amazing service, and you come to New Zealand and you don't even get decent coffee. I think the best we could do at the time was Nescafe or Greggs, right?
Oh gosh.
Yeah, before flat whites. And then, you couldn't get decent pizza here either. And yeah, so it was the bad old days of the 80s.
Yeah.
And then things have changed in New Zealand. We're so diverse, and we have amazing coffee and amazing food choices now. So I think it's wonderful. So why did I choose to stay here? Well, this is where my parents actually brought us as kids. And I got my master's here, and, I got married, got divorced, had a child while I was married. So I have a Kiwi child. I'm now a Kiwi. I've been a New Zealand citizen for, gosh, how long have I been here? 34 years now.
Mm. Well, I have a similar story, but certainly not as international as that. My parents dragged me from Palmerston North to Rotorua to Christchurch back to Palmerston North. So not quite the international career that you've had. Hey, well then, you're in New Zealand, you're a young adult, you got to think about a career. So you obviously did something before heading to Parliament.
Yes.
So
And
where was your career heading then?
well, when I first got to New Zealand, I was, I had done my university studies were in journalism and public relations, and I always, I always wanted to be a journo, and my uncle was an award-winning journalist, and and my my great grandfather owned a newspaper in Korea as well, and so I don't think many people actually know that. But I don't think I've ever talked about it. But I started my career as a journalist. I got a job at News Media Auckland, writing for Sunday News, and I was a news reporter. So tabloid.
I was going to say Sunday News was a high quality newspaper, wasn't it?
It was back then, 120 pages. And then plus some more. And those were the good old days of page 3 girls or whatever. I didn't feel quite comfortable about the page 3 girls, but the news was actually very good in the sense that I remember Herald always actually following up our stories from Sunday. So I mean, it was actually a good paper. We were very proud of the journalism that we actually did back then. And then from there, after 5 years at Sunday News, TVNZ was starting a new television show called Asia Dynamic. And cut the long story short, I got hired as the presenter and reporter. After a couple of years, I actually sort of didn't agree with the direction of the program because I felt that we needed to be not just a window into the culture and just do lip service to the ethnic communities, but I felt that we needed to tackle some serious issues, everything from domestic violence within the community, the racism, all of that stuff needed to be handled. And I put a competing proposal to TVNZ, I guess technically. So we actually won it against TVNZ.
Oh, wow. So if we go onto YouTube and Google, we'll find some clips with Melissa Lee as a presenter.
Yes. And then I owned the company, and I was producing it. I had initially hired a producer to do it because I felt that it was, and then I sort of directed and also produced a show as well. So I was there. So I began my TV career in 1994. My newspaper reporting was back in 1989 to 94. From 94 till literally 2008, I was in television.
So then why go into Parliament? I mean, let's face it, it's not a particularly easy place to be, and we'll talk about your uniqueness in a moment, but what made you decide to put your name forward?
Somebody actually, this is a question lots of people ask me, but the thing is that, Korea is actually quite a political country, in that, you compete to become class president. So my political career began from grade 1. And, I campaigned to be class president. And when the teacher asked, I think it's probably the most awful question that a teacher could ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, all my friends basically, they were doctors and firemen and police officers and teachers and all variety of careers. And I was the shortest kid in class with the loudest voice, class president, who actually said, I'm going to be the first female president of South Korea. And, boys, there was several boys, but the one who was actually next to me who actually said, girls can't be president.
Oh.
Yeah, he went home with a black eye.
Oh, okay.
But I was involved with student politics. While I was studying in Australia, I was the president of the Overseas Student Council. We lobbied the Australian government to better look after, the overseas students who were paying humongous fees to study in Australia. So that was pretty good achievement. And then when I moved to New Zealand, I was involved with the Korean Association, held offices as vice chair also the Women's Association, Korean Women's Association. So I was sort of involved in that community politics. But but in the background, because I was a journalist, I never signed up to the National Party because I didn't think it was actually fair. As a journalist, you always feel like you need to be balanced and at least not appear to be biased. And I think I did everything to try and make sure that I wasn't biased.
Yep.
And that probably meant that I was harder on the national ministers or national MPs whenever I was doing interviews with them, and the National Party people probably thought that I was not a national person, but the party machinery actually knew I was national because I was helping some MPs in the background, like my mentor and former colleague Pansy Wong, for her campaign in 1996. It was the first time an Asian person was elected to New Zealand House of Representatives. I remember going down to Christchurch and actually helping her campaign and supporting her before she got elected and after. And I was approached by the National Party and said, you should stand. And then in 1998, I had a baby, and I didn't think it was possible for me to actually stand, for the 99 election. So I sort of delayed my entry into Parliament till 2008.
Hey, look, I don't think it would be unfair to say that you are quite unique in your caucus. You're a woman of Korean birth, but then I read in your bio that there's some significant firsts that are in your career. So can you tell us a little bit about what those are?
When I got elected, I was told by the Korean embassy that I was the first Korean woman in the world outside of Korea to be elected into a legislature. So apparently I'm the first Korean woman. There is the first, which is a male, a Korean man who was elected to the House of Congress, to the Congress in the United States. He served a couple of terms, but I was the first Korean woman to be elected outside of Korea, apparently. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, there you go. Certainly the first Korean woman in the National Party caucus, anyway.
Yeah, and the first Korean woman to actually present television in New Zealand as well.
Oh, there you go. Look at you and all those firsts. Now let's talk about the areas of interest that you have at the moment. So communications and broadcasting is one of those. Obviously, we've worked together on those over the years. I mean, is there something, a personal event or experience or that's driven your interest in those spaces, as an MP?
Well, obviously for the portfolio for broadcasting and media, because I come from broadcasting and media background, I guess I do have an understanding and knowledge. So I think that's the reason why I was actually given the portfolio, I'm presuming. And obviously, with the current climate where RNZ and TVNZ is actually merging by the government, I just despair because, I mean, in the current climate where there's a cost of living crisis, that the government is actually spending, $370 million over the next 3 years to merge the two entities. And I say, what's the problem, they're trying to solve? TVNZ exists perfectly well on its own as a commercial entity with no funding from government, no direct funding from government. Radio New Zealand is completely funded by government, completely different environment, as in the, for the entities, very different cultures within TVNZ and RNZ, and they're just going to merge the two entities to create this massive, giant public media entity. And the minister claims that there's not going to be a single redundancy except for the two CEOs who are actually obviously having to be made redundant because the two entities are leaving, going and disappearing. So I just don't see it. And, all I see is pain, actually. And it's got to be done by March the 1st and, fully established by July 1st next year, well before the election. So it's a foregone conclusion that it's going to be established. So it's something that I'm going to have to fix. In terms of communications, I guess digital economy, hey, the future is here. And I think, we're, as you said, we do better than other countries when it comes to connectivity in terms of mobile services. But, there are plenty more that they can do. And I think the investment that national government actually put down initially to deliver UFB right across New Zealand, I think that was visionary. But I think the lack of funding and follow-up from the current government actually means that we still have a lot of communities who are actually lacking in service, particularly in the rural areas. And, when I travel and do public meetings, you actually hear terrible stories. I went to a public meeting in Roxborough a couple of weeks ago, and, we had emergency services where, the St. John's ambulance as well as the fire service, who are actually telling us stories about how, they get to a fire and their mobile phones don't work, to call for assistance or extra, support. And, it's almost like they need to actually get on their radio to call up to the top of the hill, and from the top of the hill, somebody else to do it. It's like a phone tree, but not using their radio, but mobile phones don't work. I think that's a major problem, especially when, you go to townships like, oh gosh, out on the West Coast, where when you have the civil defense mobile alerts, and that, a lot of the towns on the West Coast don't even get that alert. And I think that is a major issue when you have a tsunami coming and you have a huge amounts of population that don't actually get the warning.
Yeah. Well, let's look into the future, and let's assume that the next government has a Minister for Communications, Digital Economy called Melissa Lee. What are some of the tangible, goals that you'd personally be keen to see come to fruition if you were in that position to be able to make those decisions?
Oh, you're doing this really, really sneakily, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
To actually give you election. I'm not going to read.
You can speak personally rather than as a politician. Then how about that? Yeah.
No, you're trying to get me to give you secrets. Well, obviously, election policies will be announced next year, closer to the election. But look, COVID has actually meant that showed a lot of people that when you can't get to your workplaces to work, but you have to work from home, connectivity was the need. And you need really, really good connectivity for people to run their businesses, to educate your children, to communicate with your families that are around the world that you can't actually see because they're not allowed to travel into New Zealand. And so connectivity, the goal standard hasn't been achieved by the government. And there is disparities in New Zealand where some parts of New Zealand you can have amazing connectivity and some parts you actually don't. And I think we need to improve those bits that are actually not connected very well. And I just think we need to be better than what we are now. So that would be something that I would be wanting to fix and actually deliver.
Okay. Maybe we'll have another conversation in 12 months' time as well. See what's on the table at the time.
I might be able to give you a little bit more.
Well, I just want to finish up with, I want to go back to you as an individual, as a unique person in a unique environment. We know that, from all sorts of research that we have, we've got an issue around diversity and inclusion in technology. And in your caucus, by the way. But anyway, come back to, we're just talking technology at the moment. Got any tips, thoughts about how we can better foster the tech industry? And even any words of encouragement for young women of different ethnicities, etc., on how to break through?
Sure. Let me address the issue of the diversity in the National Caucus.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the lack of diversity is actually not by choice. I think it is actually delivered by the votes of New Zealand, because last term we were the most diverse caucus in Parliament. And so the fact that we lost the election in such a dramatic way that we actually lost the diversity, I think that, let me just put it that way.
Okay.
I miss my diverse caucus. I have actually, because of the election result. So the answer is you need to vote national next time round to actually make sure that we have better diversity. Not that I'm electioneering. The other thing is, I think, look, when I was at, at a recent tech cybersecurity forum, there were plenty of, people that I actually met of different cultures, as well as women represented. But the thing is that, I think it needs to start right at the beginning. One of the things that I really despair is the fact that school systems do not actually encourage STEM subjects. And the fact that, although everybody knows that, oh yeah, you actually give children iPads and they actually know how to actually operate it, and they're pretty good on the computer, and but the thing is that who's actually teaching them to actually advance those skills? And I think our curriculum probably needs to actually change to actually equip our children for the future, or future that is here now.
Yeah.
And we're not actually producing enough children to the capacity and the capability that we actually require the skill sets to be in the workplace currently. And I mean, at the moment, I mean, every day we have more than, if you look at Seek or whatever, there's more than 3,000 ICT jobs available, and we're having to we need to import them, and we can't import them because the immigration, framework means that we can't actually easily hire those people from offshore as well. But the thing is that we should be able to produce those skill sets here in New Zealand, and we're not doing that. So we need to future-proof that. So I think the education system really needs to actually pull finger and actually sort of do that. That's one aspect. And encourage young women, and grow the diversity from right at the beginning, I think, is what we actually need. Yeah. Because often, when you actually think of tech, you sort of tend to think, people who are, slightly geeky and, who are really good with numbers and who are techie, gets into this thing. And I've met amazingly funky tech people. And I think you need to promote yourselves, and do cool events where kids can actually get encouraged and say, hey, this is amazing, Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, thanks so much. Hey, look, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Got any last comments or thoughts you'd like to share with people that'll be watching this?
I think, innovation is the key for us to actually grow New Zealand's economy. And I think I can actually guarantee that I'm here to support you. And, I need, and what I want to do is actually make sure that the communications channel between government and the people who actually do the work is actually open, and always be able to take advice and take suggestions and good ideas, so that we because government doesn't know how to do these things, right? Government should be able to create a framework in government regulations so that it is free for the business people to actually go and do their thing. We should not be the employers or actually prevent you from doing what you do best. So I can actually say that is my goal. That's what I see as my role. And if I become the minister next year, that's what I can actually say. That's what I'll do.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you once again, Melissa, for taking time out of what is obviously a very busy time. I mean, the House is sitting at the moment. So once again, thank you. And thanks everybody for listening in. If you're watching this and you want to listen again, it'll be on all our podcast channels and on our website, and with a range of other people that have done this session as well. So Melissa, thank you, and we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you.